What's up, YouTubers? It's 2017 at the abandoned monitoring station. This will be game 11 in the series, featuring a brand new map. Lots of fun to be had, and our first application of our new house rules, what we're calling the abandoned monitoring station Omega series of rules. We're currently at Omega 1.03, and this here is your initial setup of the board. It is halfway through turn number 1. Japan has just completed its turn, and after having debated several different approaches to Japan this time around, we stuck pretty much with a standard opening J1 attack, going conservatively up into North China, actually less conservatively than I had planned, and the reason being, you'll notice that the Russians have abandoned any pretense of defending a war. They may double back, you never know, but there is an apparent reason why the Russians are hightailing it to Moscow. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we've spread into the first layer of Chinese territories here, dumped as many airplanes as we can into King Sea to guard what is a military base there. One of the new pieces we're playing with this time around allows me to purchase just infantry and transports, and I can put it anywhere. So first turn, I've put it in Quang Sea, I suppose that's called. Stuck with the standard move of putting as much Navy as possible into the Philippines, and naval battle went well. Didn't lose any ships. The battleships, as you see, took the hits. Land battle was a nail biter there. Missed entirely on the first round of attack, and only got one hit the second time around. So it was tough, and it was a good thing I brought in more land units than I originally had planned to. And I may talk at the end of the video what I thought I might have done J1, but stuck with that. Ended up winning the Philippines. That, by the way, destroys the military base that the U.S. starts off with on the Philippines in this version of our house rules. I did send a destroyer down here into the Sydney Sea Zone. Unfortunately, that 50-50 shot didn't go my way.
Why is there a submarine off of Amur? That's an unusual move.
Well, good point, Chris. There is a submarine up here in the Amur Sea Zone 5, and that would be because that is one of the Lend-Lease zones under the Omega 1.03 house rules. If that sea zone is open and Japan has attacked Russia, Russia can get 4 IPCs. As it is, they get 2 when they're at war with Germany. So you'll note in the out-of-box rules, the Sea Zone 125 and Archangel are a Lend-Lease zone where Russia can get a national objective bonus to get a couple extra IPCs. We've added a couple of those. One of them being there, Sea Zone 5, the other being down here in Sea Zone 80 and control of Persia. Now the Allies don't yet control Persia, but it's looking like that may change in the near future. Now over here on the Europe map, that's where things got a little bit interesting on the G1 turn. Anybody who's watched my videos knows that the Wasm style of G1 play is usually to build up transports in 113 to at least retain the capacity of doing a sea lion attack on Germany's second turn. We didn't do that this time around. Bought a destroyer and a sub and some guys, and what we did with them is to go eastward this time. A G1 attack into Russia, and specifically into eastern Poland, which I judged to be the only available territory worth anything that I could actually survive a counterattack on. So we brought everything there that could go there, paratrooped a couple guys in there for good measure, and positioned ourselves thusly. Also building a military base here in Romania to beef up the military capacity there along the Russian border as quickly as humanly possible. The naval attack on the UK, standard operating procedure, although it went really well, I gotta admit. There were no lost units there. So the Bismarck not only lives, but has a couple buddies there to keep him company. See how long that's the case, but there's a a decent-sized little German Navy starting to germinate over there. The other 50-50 shot, the U-boat that could, actually could not this time around, so that's unfortunate. Interesting counterattack by Chris that I did not expect. So he took all his land units up here on the Swedish peninsula here and took them into Finland, hoping to beat back those units there that were coming down on Novgorod from the north. Gotta say though, this was statistically improbable how that went down. 2 rounds of attack, and those infantry and 3 air units for Russia got how many hits, Chris?
0.
0 hits against those 5 German infantry. Peeled off a couple Russian infantry until Chris kind of fell on his sword and got out of there before he lost any more. So not a good first round of rolling for the European allies, but it's still early here in turn 1. All right, beginning of turn 2, end of turn 1. It has been another interesting round. So the U.S. Made no attacks this turn, just shimmied some dudes up to Hawaii and positioned them accordingly. The Anzacians have not attacked, but have done what they need to do in order to take their bonuses. And under the Omega 1.03 house rules, Anzac receives a bonus for the allies controlling these 3 remote islands. And then they get the average 2 bonuses, the regular ones from the out-of-box rules, for controlling Dutch New Guinea and their original territories, or these islands rather, and then their original territories and Malaya, which they still do. So turn 1, Anzac is drawing 21 IPCs. That's kind of silly if you ask me, but you know, we'll revisit it in 1.04. The UK Europe, you may recognize this as General Hand Grenade's Middle Earth strategy, which Chris and I both agree is a valid and apparently pretty powerful approach. So kudos to General Hand Grenade. And while I'm at it, I neglected in the last segment to give a shout out to Big Al for the suggestion of sending that destroyer down to Sydney. That was, unfortunately, didn't work out for me, but after discussing it with him, I agree that's a good idea, and glad to have used it. So the Chinese, wow, this is an interesting situation here. After turn 1, the Chinese have consolidated everything in Yunnan, knowing that, you know, that's where the real showdown stands to take place. So that's already, those reds are 5, so that's 18 Chinese dudes plus a plane and a UKer to boot. So that's a impressive force there stacked up against a, you know, obviously equally large but air heavy unit over there. UK Europe has, as one might have expected, reacted to Germany's lack of a Sea Lion move with the Taranto maneuver. Pretty successful. Landed those planes both in Syria and in Malta. Italy, with its only one C-Zone 95 set of units left, decided after some deliberation to go for the national objective bonus, controlling Gibraltar, southern France, and Greece. And between what poultry units it had left and paratroop maneuver into Greece, was just barely able to pull that off. Greece almost didn't go well for it. But we took care of that, took care of the French fleet as well. And, you know, obviously Italy is still fragile, still vulnerable, but it's in, you know, as good of a shape as it could be in the circumstances. So that worked out. We have some Italians here buttressing Paris only because it became obvious to me right at the very end here that with our new paratroopian rules, there was a outside chance that the French could have come from Normandy and London and actually had a non-zero odds of liberating Paris on turn 1. That would just be asinine. We can't allow that to happen. So we buttressed them with some Italians. Of course, the Germans, there are fewer left in Paris than there would have been otherwise had I not made that paratroop move to Russia. But still glad that I did. So Italy was not able, however, to take Yugoslavia and Bulgaria like it usually does. It had to pick its battle because you've only got so many Italian units to work with. So in London proper here, we've brought some guys over from Canada with this lone transport here that's hanging out there naked. Chris built some dudes and a plane, but in keeping with the Middle Earth strategy, London is locked down defensively, but is fortressing, while the UK focuses its builds on the Middle Earth section of the board. You see some tanks down there in South Africa ready to join up these forces here on turn 2. Now halfway through turn 2, and so far so good for the Axis. Japan has taken the next step to completing its manifest destiny, occupying the Money Islands here at the end of turn 2, beefing up all the exterior ones from interference by the local allies who don't presently seem inclined to interfere. Building 2 more facilities here, one minor factory in French Indochina, as well as a second military base up here in Anhui to fill in the Chinese territories. You'll see here a little less expansion in China than normal. That's due to a couple of things. One is that he's got a mess of dudes right here in a plane, so you don't want to get too adventurous. But the second is another house rule which I don't think we've mentioned yet, and that is Chinese guerrillas. So if Japan occupies a territory but leaves it empty, this house rule provides that one Chinese unit pops up there automatically. So we are taking pains to make sure that every Chinese territory we take remains occupied by at least one guy. But you'll see here a little case of ring around the Mongolia, and that's because Japan's finally activated the Mongolian rule by taking Amur. It did that because it was given some comfort by these Russian soldiers, not even playing around with fainting one way or the other. They're headed to Moscow. There's no two ways about that. Reason being that turn 2 went well for Germany as well. You'll see here continuing the Russia crush strategy that it's pursuing this turn. Took all those guys up from East Poland up into the Baltic states. That's 20-something, 23 infantry there in Baltics. Another 5 in Vyborg came down from Finland, kind of called Russia's bluff there on its willingness to invade Finland. And of course, it didn't do that. That wouldn't have been the wise move. He instead has built up for a big last stand there in Novgorod, building another 4 tanks and an AA gun, bringing every mechanized unit that could get there up there, every infantry that could go up there. So it's poised to be a rather large confrontation when it comes around to Germany's next turn. We are now headed into the second half of turn 2. See if things swing the Allies' way. About to begin turn 3 of the game, and here's how it looks. The U.S. has brought its Hawaii fleet, its San Francisco fleet, everything it has in the Pacific up here to as far as it could get towards Japan. It triggered that little destroyer blocker that I left, sending the alarms off in Tokyo saying, hey, wait a minute, we got to come defend the homeland. Of course, that wasn't completely unexpected, but now it's time to take action. Anzac has defied my expectations. Virtually every game Chris has ever played Anzac, he builds a carrier at this point, but I think perhaps wisely he sees that, there's all these 3, 4, 5 Japanese transports in range of Australia, so, land units might be a good idea. Rest of UK Pacific is kind of holed up here in Calcutta, pulling back from Yunnan as the Chinese stack just goes on a mad rampage. So all those Chinese fellows over in Yunnan are now up in Sichuan and kind of throwing off the alignment of the Japanese force a little bit. That That yellow is a 10 chip, so those 11 dudes and assorted supporting units that were getting ready to just roll over Yunnan, well, they're out of position now, and the brand new military base in Anhui is suddenly vulnerable. Back over here, we see a modified implementation of General Hand Grenade's Middle Earth strategy. So instead of the Persian base on UK2 and a naval base, we see instead a minor factory and an air base, both here in Cairo. Recognizing that Italy has been weak, and really this is where Chris is choosing to press his advantage here in the UK. Probably because our house rules provide, as Cliffside Bunkers do, for a victory token for taking all of Africa, and so he's pushing towards that rather than backstopping the Indians as Hand Grenade usually does with the Persian factory. So you see there's a number of builds here in South Africa waiting to be picked up and or moved up. There's a lot here left in Africa because UK took this turn to clean out most of the Italians. Unfortunately, did not take care of the dogs. Italy, though, having a better return in response than you may have expected. So it has cleaned out the Mediterranean. Of course, the UK kind of cleaned it up for us, but nothing else was built. To my mild surprise, this Italian fleet actually survived because UK chose not to attack it, rather pulling all its air units back from where they were, giving Italy a little bit more breathing room than it expected. So Italy has purchased a transport again, and with this military base to which the factory in South France was downgraded, it has a capacity to build transports in addition to land infantry. So it did that, and without any Air Force in the vicinity, it's actually safe there. So for the time being, Italians finally filled out the rest of Southern Europe here, taking Bulgaria and Yugoslavia. Then the successful planes coming back down to Libya, and Italians purchasing a military base there in Libya to not go quietly into that good night in the face of the Egyptian hordes, but rather put up as much fight for the defense of North Africa and thus the avoidance of that Allied victory token as possible. U.S. in the Atlantic, slowly but surely building up a fleet to deliver some potential force projection here. Germany continuing to enjoy convoying the crap out of London. London just holding fast there per the Middle Earth strategy, just enough to kind of keep itself safe, but not much more going on. This whole stack of German Air Force, though, is ready to visit the Russians here on turn 3. It's the middle of turn 3. Japan has just finished its turn, and in response to the oncoming American horde, Japan has, of course, taken a turn to build up the C-Zone 6. One of these swung up from the Philippines. The other carrier group we built and reinforced the homeland with some additional planes on a few other ships just for good measure. We've reoriented the land units here a little bit, taken a little bite out of Russia, not nearly as big as we could have, but also slapping down a pillbox here, one of the new units presented in the Omega rules that increases the defense value of 2 infantry on a coast from an amphibious assault, so that's fun. We've also reoriented the position of these Asian forces in response to the Chinese stack moving around. So we've beefed up Anhui and that base there, the military base, as much as possible with guys and planes, pulling them all around, bringing up the other half of the stack here and trying to keep them boxed in as much as possible here so we don't expose our soft underbelly on the coast, while continuing to position the rest of the fleet here towards Calcutta India has really kind of laid down on this one and turtled just for as long as possible while sending its planes, if you noticed last turn, up into Russia here in reaction to Germany rolling all over them. As, of course, they've done on turn 3 so far. So we've taken Germany and Russia's turn already. And as we expected, the German horde rolled right over Novgorod, and a decent amount of guys left. But I'll tell you, the battle did not go nearly as cleanly as it could have, and Chris kind of made up for all his bad rolls in one turn there with 5 out of 9? 5 out of 9 AA guns hitting and trimming the German Luftwaffe considerably in response. So we've got a couple bombers, a couple TACs there, but really kind of starting to thin the herd a little bit here when it comes to the German Air Force. That said, not complaining. German line is holding steady. It's pretty beefy. The Russians falling back to Moscow now and waiting on the Eastern Siberian folks to kind of save the day and bolster them a little bit here. Hoping the rest of the Allies can also come and deliver some help on the rest of turn 3. It's the beginning of turn 4, and the Allies have pushed back a bit. So the U.S. reacted to Japan's buildup over here by pulling themselves back to Hawaii, dropping the blocker in Midway, and kind of resetting the tables on the naval confrontation. Well, in the meantime, that leaves enough safe zone for Anzac to feel good about its regular move of building carriers. So they're going to start churning those out once a turn at this rate. Of course, with Malaya finally taken, the Anzacs have finally got a cut in their bonus a little bit. And UK Pacific is kind of dwindling a little bit with all the convoys happening. China made a big, strong move into Hunan and took out a good contingent of Japanese forces there, unfortunately, including more tactical bombers than I would have liked to part with. Good news is there's still this primary contingent up here and some more folks over here. The Indians have come up, tried to fill in the gap as much as possible. I think Japan's in a good position for a counterstrike, but problem being it's just a lot of back and forth here in China, slowing down the advance into Asia, which of course is exactly what Chris is trying to accomplish. Europe is going strong, pulling everything into Egypt here into the Red Sea. That is a whole mess of planes, bombers, tactical bombers, tanks, the works, supported by plenty of ships to carry them here in the Red Sea. Italy thought long and hard about how to respond, ended up building and consolidating its planes and forces here in Libya as much as possible to hold out in North Africa as long as it can, and ultimately took its navy here into this sea zone and was successful in taking out the destroyer that was left there. There was no scramble, and dropped an infantry in Transjordan. Should have made that 2 infantry though, because the Anzacs came back and can-opened them right back and reacquired Jordan, opening up the Suez Canal for the Egyptians to pour through on the next turn. They don't get very far, but it's farther than I would have liked. In the meanwhile, Italy's building up a bit of infantry there and kind of waiting for the inevitable. The U.S., of course, is building up pressure here in the Atlantic, getting ready to pop soon, no doubt, perhaps even on turn 4. We've reached the middle of turn 4. Japan has just completed its turn, and with the Americans pulled back, the Japanese have again repositioned their navy. Got the blocker up top, a little more even spread this time. We've got a carrier group in each of 4 sea zones now. The effort to clear out China ran into a bit of a snag, so we took back Hunan, but Yunnan hung on for dear life. The odds were certainly in our favor, but this is one of those that the dice did not favor, and pulled back with only a tank and a couple planes left. So the Brits hold on to Yunnan for now, but at least their numbers are thinned out. Japan's jumped forward, taken out West India and the military base that was in it, so continuing to encircle Calcutta, while the Russians have continued to pull back from the German front, leaving a little DMZ in between them there. The Germans have continued to push forward, taking Ukraine, which degrades that facility to a military base under the Omega 1.03 rules. And Germany filling back in the backstop here, building, what was it, 16, 17 infantry last time, and getting ready for the American onslaught represented by that blow-up piece here on the rest of turn 4. We've reached the beginning of turn 5, and much has happened, at least in the way of positioning for next turn. That's a blow-up box representing the entire U.S. fleet in the Pacific, and of course it has once again moved up to Sea Zone 16 and triggered the blocker that was waiting for it. So alarm bells are once again going off in Tokyo, ready to defend against that invading fleet. Meanwhile, the Anzakians have finished building their little invasion force, supplementing their navy with, yep, that's a couple transports that can now start to be bothersome up here in southeast China. The Chinese have formed another little nut there, waiting to put up the last big fight that they can. UK Pacific. Well, they made the best of their surviving forces, took out those invaders in West India, which may or may not have been ill-advised, but hey, at least on the Japanese part, mind you, of putting them there in the first place. But it split their forces up a little bit. It's giving them something to focus on. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to justify it. I'm not sure if that was a great idea in retrospect or not. But in any event, we've put a navy in West Indian Ocean, which cuts out some of their bonuses anyway. One of the bonuses we're playing with here in these new rules is that the UK gets +3, I think it is, if there's no enemy subs in this area, and there is one now. I've also almost wanted to put some pressure here on the Egyptian forces, but they're not feeling it. They dropped a couple guys in Persia just to be safe, but in the meantime they've broken out into the Mediterranean. Italy thought about striking back, decided that was a bad idea, so it is now holed up here in the mainland. U.S., as expected, has come forward on the Atlantic side as well, dropped that major fleet into Gibraltar and Sea Zone 91. It's a lot of stuff piled up, and to be supplemented by even more transports full of American dudes here on turn 5. We are midway through turn 5. You see right there off the bat that Japan snuck one through on the U.S. and took some space up in Alaska. Obviously, that's not a huge game changer, but it sets back their momentum a little bit anyway. Built up even more fleet there to house its mini aircraft. Guarding the coastline a little bit, and cleaned up the mess in China. Got rid of these exterior territories, and again moving inward just not nearly as quickly as I'd like. It's a lot of back and forth across the line here. Japan, its expansion in both China and into India is stalled, and that of course is exactly what the Allies hope for in a situation like this, so it's a little bit frustrating. I think I'm beefing up, just not nearly as quickly as I would like. Over here in Russia, so obviously the U.S., UK advance is giving Germany pause. It both bought all land units here to kind of reinforce Europe, but as a result, not only did it not build anything along the Russian line, but I made a tactical error here in not reinforcing Ukraine enough, and as a result, Russia was able to come in with both tanks and paratroop from Moscow and took out Ukraine, wiping out the facility there entirely, and now breaking my line and threatening to flank my guys. So that is frustrating to me. That is a bad situation now for both Germany and Italy to be in. And we're going to see just how bad it is in the rest of turn 5. Well, it's the beginning of turn 6. No lack of drama here on turn 5. For one thing, you see that the Japanese are still there in Alaska, and will be at least until the end of America's next turn. They were forced to build, and Chris expresses to me that he had some degree of frustration by that fact that he was forced to rejigger his builds and swing back to the Western to cleanse those guys out of Alaska, which I know the feeling because if you've been watching these YouTube videos, you'll see that he did the exact same thing to me when he was playing Japan and I was playing the U.S. back 3 or 4 games ago. So once again, the U.S. stack here has done the do-si-do back to Hawaii, and the guys have gotten out the boat this time and said, screw it, we know we're not going anywhere. So they're just hanging out and projecting power in the Pacific, forcing Japan to spend a ridiculous amount on defensive fleets, which, you know, is an advantage in and of itself. Anzac on the attack has built its second aircraft carrier for Anzac, and really just made a nuisance of itself. Kind of did the equal and opposite of the Alaska move by just sending a random transport out to take Java. Now, I mean, at least this time, you know, we saw that coming, we're going to take it back, but that doesn't make it any less of a nuisance because that redirects valuable land forces that really ought to have been focused on India all this time, and because they haven't been, because they've been farting around with these Anzac folks and mostly with these Chinese folks, you'll see that here at the end of turn 5 there are still 16 Indian dudes there in Calcutta. So that's not where the Japanese player wants to be. And we're seeing what we can do about that here on turn 6, but it's not where we want to be. You saw Russia is ascendant, and so they're feeling a whole lot more confident than they were breaking out. UK sharing in that optimism, cleansed out that sub that I had left for them, and has built a big old air force and moved all its folks over here. You see some planes over at Gibraltar as well. The U.S. decided on this turn to bring their stack here to C-Zone 96, dump them into Brook, where they were joined by some UK folks for what appears to be the final push into Libya here on turn 7. Certainly had many options, and took him quite a while to pick which one of those options he was going to do. But he toyed with taking southern France, which I had left open. I mean, he had a colorable shot of even taking Italy if he had tried hard enough, but rather than overextending himself, what the Allies are doing here is focusing on Africa, because that's one of our victory tokens, as it is in Cliffside as well. But this is a victory token in our home rules, and that will give him a free tech advance if he can cleanse out and take the entire continent of Africa. So in the meantime, you know, Italy is collecting, I think they brought home a total of 6 IPCs, because all these subs are down here choking it to death with convoys. That there is no picnic, so it's not like he's letting Italy build up while he focuses on Africa. Yeah, that's exactly how Italy feels right there. Italy is a barking dog. It's got no bite. You also see the U.S. Sending destroyers, and UK did as well, though they lost theirs, on a bug hunt here for these remaining German subs. Reason for that being another house rule, which is that one of the Allied victory tokens is that there are no enemy warships in either the Mediterranean or the Atlantic. He's cleared out the Med for himself, so all he has to do is get rid of those 3 subs, because under our interpretation, the Baltic Sea here does not count as part of the Atlantic, to get that victory token for himself, which then, of course, comes with another die roll on the tech chart. So will he be able to do that on turn 7? Time will tell. Well, it's the middle of turn 6. Some interesting twists. So you'll see something that's never been seen before, because nobody's been crazy enough to try it. But so anyway, I decided to go all in on the Alaskan thing. There is enough in Hawaii here to amphibiously take that back. And I don't think I didn't see those other planes coming from the other direction too. But and he may well yet take that back. But with the pressure off in Japan, it occurred to me to go big or go home on Alaska. So and I'm already occupying a lot of America's time over here. So I thought I would make it as difficult as possible to root the Japanese out of Alaska. So you'll see a military base, a pillbox, and every plane that I could throw at it from the Japanese sea waters, which are now empty. Over here in Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, we haven't really accomplished much other than to position some guys, take back Java, start beefing up our islands here from Anzac attack. And on the European board, you see Germany's last gasp here. They've been holding on those transports, hoping they weren't going to get sunk, and took advantage of the opportunity. And a special quirk offered by our house rules that we're still play testing here, of the paratrooping, 2 from each available air base. There's 1 in Paris and 1 in West Germany here, so Axis took advantage of that to double paratroop some guys in, fortunately not shot down. Something I refer to as the English Channel Fireball, after a Magic the Gathering combination that turned out to be broken. I'm not sure, I don't know, I'm not sure if we're going to keep that or not, but that combination for the Axis turns the new rule that was intended to balance the game into a potent weapon. Of course, UK also has 2 air bases in range of Europe, but the fact is that with Axis' early lead in the military count, it's a potent weapon if not checked. So Germany got a reprieve here by getting London's money, but is still facing some weakness here along the Russian front. You'll see the Russians moving forward with a ton of offensive units now that they've had the capacity to buy, given Germany's stall out here in Russia. That yellow token is 10 infantry, and there are in fact 2 of them sitting there. So that's no picnic for the Germans. And you have that square here representing this enormous stack of naval units, and more to come on turn 6. Well, we're about to begin round 7 in the game. We see that the U.S. has been forced to spend most of its build here on land units in the western U.S. to root out the ever-growing infestation of Japanese in Alaska. But you don't see any amphibious assault or other Navy units anywhere in sight. That's because Chris zigged in response to my zag, and now the entire U.S. combined Anzac fleet is down here in Queensland. So that actually puts him in greater striking distance, and it gives him the potential to do more harm than he's posed yet in the game, and puts all 7 of those fighters, not to mention these 2 empty carriers here horribly out of position to respond to the U.S. So best move that U.S. could have made for sure. UK Europe has spent a little bit of money, built up. Its airplanes have come back from their Russian adventuring, and now we see quite a bit of offensive potential there in India. I'm not looking forward to see how that works out. There's a bit of damage on that factory. First bit of damage we've done in any strat bombing so far in the game, due again to modification of the rules that we're playing with that increased the defensive power of interceptors. There weren't any interceptors at the time, that's why I took a chance to take a shot. We might have to revisit that rule as well, because it's really kind of shut down the whole strategic bombing enterprise. Down here you'll see, so there have finally been some victory points scored back and forth this round. Under our local rules here, you can lose a victory token for reasons that we've explained a little bit more in our explanatory rules video. But right now, each side has one. The Axis lost one, so the Germans got a victory token here for taking London, and got super carriers to go along with it. Their carriers can carry 3, which helps them none because they've not had a carrier the entire game. We also reached the threshold of IPCs, I think 136 that the Axis can get to get a victory token. Again, that's an out-of-the-box condition for winning the game. Here it just gets you a token. Japanese, having the most IPCs, managed to snag heavy artillery on the tech chart, but they lost that because the Axis subsequently went down in IPCs. And then on the Allied side, you see the consequence of them finally taking Africa, as we'll see, and as a result they got the tech propaganda, which gives the UK additional money every turn. And over here you'll see how they got Africa, and that's because they took that entire stack and everything that was in Tobruk and did their worst with it. US taking that battle and winning it handily, quite a bit left over, and that's how many naval units are waiting in the Mediterranean to take those fellows off to their next adventure. US also buying a military base, so we can actually produce in Africa now, as can the UK over here in Egypt, so that's ugly. Italy is just holed up, spending whatever money trickles in through the convoy and kind of hoping to weather the storm. In the meantime here, US responding pretty mightily to the invasion fleet of London here. So we saw I didn't call this out last time, but this happened, which is that the Red October here slipped through and took out what was left of the invasion fleet. There was actually one damaged battleship and 5 transports, and the sub came in, took that out, destroyed all 6 ships, leaving the folks in the UK stranded, but that's okay. They didn't really have anywhere else to go. And what you did see last time was that Germany had purchased on its turn 5 subs, thinking, oh well, this battleship here it's a good blocker from the American fleet that was down here in Sea Zone 91, and so we'll wait here, wait for the battleship to absorb that hit, right? Assuming that battleship was going to die, right? One ship protecting 5 transports, one way or another that was going to get killed, but presumably it was going to be on the UK or US turn. That didn't happen, which allowed the US ships to slide up there, supported by that bomber that you see, and kill all 5 subs. That's a heavy investment of IPCs that Germany lost. Was hoping to use those subs as a counterattack to destroy a fleet that would have come to retake London. Didn't work out that way. US outmaneuvered us. And now we're left with a navy to take care of on turn 7. And before we go, we'll note that that 1 sub left is the only thing preventing the Allies from getting their second victory token, which is no enemy warships, no Axis warships anywhere in the Atlantic or the Mediterranean. And that one little guy, that one little sliver of black there, is the only warship left in the Atlantic. Let's see if they can keep their toehold in the waters on turn 7. Halfway through turn 7, there's still some Japanese folks here. You'll notice that some planes have relocated, though, although we've built up infantry instead. Those planes have shot back over here, refilled one of those carriers, got a couple on the land. But the main naval action in the Pacific is down here, of course. Japan having amassed all of its fleet now into its own stack. 2 can play with the tray. And we've got these U.S. folks facing off against these Japanese folks, who are all located here in the Philippine Sea Zone. Have a couple naval units there acting as either blockers or backup. In the meantime, we continue to build up bit by bit here with Japanese infantry in Southeast Asia. You'll notice now each of these 5 territories here has either a minor factory, as in French Indochina, or as in the other 4 military bases. So these are the pieces we're using for military bases, although we've run out of those, so these are our backup military bases. Japan did get a little adventurous, tried its hand at taking down the guys in Szechuan, retreated after a round because, you know, as the odds might have suggested, Chinese beat them back. But, you know, it was worth it. We came away with a land unit still, saved all our air units, and whittled down I'd say half of the guys who are in Szechuan there, make them a bit more manageable. Japan finally starting to break out here a little bit and gobble up a bit more of China. We'll see if it keeps that pace, though, with the Chinese continuing to build and the Russians now getting aggressive once more. So it's built more of its stack, split up those stacks. Again, those yellows are 10 apiece, and there are 2 of those yellow stacks there in that territory, another one over there. Germans were flush with cash last time, but you know, once you spread that around the entire continent of Europe, your line, although intact, still remains a lot thinner than you'd like it to be. So you know, there are a fair number of guys there and a sizable stack of dudes over there in Novgorod as well, but you know, there's a lot coming at them as well. Germany, again, beefing up in Europe, finishing up Scotland, adding a few more subs just to stay ahead of the victory token there, but mostly focus on ground game here in Europe. And we'll see if it's enough to hold off the invading Allied horde on turn 7. Well, we've reached the beginning of turn 8. And contrary to prior expectations, it doesn't look like we're going to reach the end of the game anytime soon. U.S. has now spent some builds in the Pacific this time, beefing up again, another naval presence, while inching their reluctant home land units up towards Alaska. To take that back again one of these days. Down here in the south of the Pacific, the huge multinational fleet in Queensland has stayed there for the time being. Other, that is, than to send out a few annoying onesie-twosies just to give Japan extra hassle. So he's dropped a couple subs there as would-be convoyers, and using the can opener strategy, was able to get rid of my blocker and shoot a transport out to Sumatra just to pick up 4 IPCs for the annoying little Anzacians. Down here in China, he's built up a bit and moved around just to keep me chasing him, while the Indians have gotten bold and a bit aggressive, building tanks and guys and using their planes effectively, as well as their paratrooping ability to jump over and take Shan State, killing the 3 infantry that were there as well as the military base. So that's a waste of 19 IPCs on the Japanese side. Again, just more for me to deal with. Stopping the momentum of the Japanese fleet entirely. The Japanese land invasion is at a standstill, and that's exactly where the Allies want them to be, unfortunately. On the rest of turn 7 here, we've seen major buildup in Africa. So this fleet right here is still there in the Mediterranean, has not yet taken the plunge. We know Chris to be a conservative player, and rather than try and poke holes in the European continent that then might get plugged again, he's just biding his time. He's built up a second U.S. military base. You see that they're in Libya. So now the U.S. has 2 bases where he can produce units here in Africa, in northern Africa. So what need then for an invasion force, you might say? Well, none apparently, because there's nothing coming from the eastern. These naval units here from the U.S. have actually peeled off from that stack in order to come around Gibraltar and no doubt put some pressure on Germany to keep its navy up, and again go chasing after that Atlantic victory token, see if they get there in turn 8. Halfway through turn 8, the Pacific looks much the way it did before. We played around quite a bit with moving this Japanese fleet and positioning it elsewhere. Problem being that puts us too far out of position, so ultimately decided to keep it parked in the Philippines. Had to live with a couple subs being there, but did do what it took to retake Sumatra, keep my bonuses going. They knew we were going to do that. They're just being annoying. We, re-solidified Southeast Asia. I'm sure we'll go back and forth on that one a bit. Continued to build up here. Russia, again, getting adventurous, feeling comfortable in the Europe map, so it's sending a mess of tanks over towards Asia, and we're learning to deal with that. Built yet another military base to compensate. In Russia proper, they've used their offensive capability to clear out quite a bit, punched a hole all the way now through the middle of the line in Germany, bordering on the soft underbelly of Europe. So we're going to have to close that back up, but just goes to show when you're covering this much ground, even though Germany had a glut of 115 IPCs to spend after taking London, it really doesn't look like much has changed on the board, because it's going to cover so much and defend so much, and that's hard to do when Italy's virtually not there. So Germany's trying to play the entire Europe map by itself and finding that difficult to do. We'll see how they fare on the rest of turn 8. Well, it's the beginning of turn 9, and we're no closer to an end in sight. U.S. has spent virtually all of its build here in the Pacific this time around, building up a fleet to transport all those land units it had to build to flush out Alaska, which you'll see is now finally done. But hey, Japan got that bonus for 3-4 turns, so nobody's complaining there. Took it away from the U.S. too. That was a 11-point IPC swing, I think that was at the end of the day. More than that, maybe. It was worth the investment, I'd say. So, in the meantime, avoiding confrontation, Chris has slid his fleet even farther down into the Pacific, just hanging out close enough to be a nuisance, a threat, keep me in the theater without actually doing anything. UK has gotten so bold as to start bombing my military bases now, so they are certainly not intimidated by the oncoming Japanese folks. In the Mediterranean, we see not much happening at all, really, other than building up and getting ready to do something someday. The fleet that was here in 91 has said, just kidding, come back here to join the fleet in the Mediterranean. which is all prepared to launch some badness here pretty soon. Italy's actually done something other than buy infantry for once, and it's thrown a destroyer there, and hope that we can maybe flush out some of these subs that are just dangling like icicles off the bottom of Europe, sucking it dry of all IPCs. Literally, Italy made almost no money this turn. It's at 15, but it was convoyed for 13 by these darn little subs. So something's got to change, or Germany's just not going to be able to hold this whole map by itself much longer than turn 9. We're halfway through turn 9. We just completed Japan's turn, and it is feeling the pinch. So there is this new American force here coming around the Pacific. There is this nasty multinational fleet down here that keeps growing with Anzac forces. And in the meantime, this fleet here has been sitting in the Philippines feeling the pinch, trying to ward off each one of those while still continuing to push on multiple fronts in Asia. We've slid that down to the Malayan sea zone now, and we're going to see what shakes up here. But Japan is fighting those two naval battles, warding off those two fleets, while at the same time trying to come in here into India, not making any progress. That enormous stack of Indians there is slowing things down. They've even started strat bombing, as you see, and I didn't even get the chance to fix that damage this time because I need the money elsewhere. They're draining money from me with these subs, and I haven't had the destroyer capacity to deal with that, although I just purchased a couple. And really what's helping to keep them afloat is this propaganda tech that the Indians of the UK, Europe actually won with its victory token by taking Africa, but because they share technology, that has become a boost that has really kept the Indian nation alive. So showing that this technology capacity, this technology house rule, and using them really for the first time ever, because we've always hated the tech roles, but now that they're guaranteed outcomes of certain strategic objectives, and you don't know what you're going to get, it really adds a number of possibilities to the game. I think it's going to prove fun. I think this house rule thing with technology is going to prove fun. Not so fun for Japan right now, I'll tell you that. Because now it's also, in addition to dealing with the Indians and the Chinese who just refuse to go away, you've got adventuresome Russians down here sending all these mech units because they've got nothing else to do in Europe. So now I've got to defend that front. Just built yet another military base in Mongolia, of all places. When's the last time you saw that? At least in the European board, Germany has reclaimed a little bit of momentum. This turn went pretty well. It's consolidated its subs there into a wolf pack, and it started to build the germ of a navy anyway. And in the meantime, building up enough stuff in Novgorod that it is kind of scaring off the Russian infantry and starting to make a dent into their production capacity with that strat bomb that we just launched. So there's still some damage left there. 3 more bombers and some escorts up there in Novgorod getting ready. He's got his planes pulled back to act as interceptors. But we'll see what the other allies can do to slow the Axis momentum here on turn 9. We're at the beginning of round 10, and the board has changed shape quite a bit. The U.S., as might have been expected, brought these fleet and land units up into the Soviet Far East, also building a base there. Now they own a base in Alaska instead of Japan, and adopting what we like to call around here the Alaskan forward naval strategy of shucking dudes over into Russia to root out the Japanese infestation. There's not a lot of Japanese Navy ready to prepare to respond to that quite yet, although we've got a base up here in the land and a number of ground units, but how quickly those infantry can push back 6 tanks and 6 guys coming in and quite a few more next turn remains to be seen. Japan had taken the Gilbert Islands only because that was a bonus for the Anzacs, and they took that back. The U.S. choosing not to launch this major fleet from down here. They took out my little blocker, but didn't take them north as they may have done. Instead, just waiting to see what I do over here from the Malay Sea Zone. Indians also kind of biding their time, not doing too much this turn other than building up and bombing more military bases, giving Japan more infrastructure woes. Big news of this turn, though, is that the zit finally popped here down in Africa, and we've got we had an invasion not in Italy, not in France, but in Greece. That little holder right there indicates this blow-up box, which indicates that the multinational cooperation here in Greece, first occupied by the U.S. with a number of troops that, if I threw everything at it that Germany had to offer, I probably could have taken them out. But of course, as he should, he backed those up in a can opener type fashion with the all the British that were down in Africa, meaning there's no way Germany can root those out of Greece. So, and we have another British Navy here building up in Canada. So, gives a lot of pause for what the Axis are going to do here. All right, so upon additional deliberation, which I was already beginning to think the time we shot the last video here, we're not going to go any further into the game. In order to play this through to its victory condition end, we'd have several more turns. Nobody is close to collapsing except perhaps Italy. But this is where we're going to call the game in order to have any chance of completing a second game yet this weekend, which we only get to do once a year anyway. So Axis are conceding. This is our first time defeating a J1 attack, which means the house rules that we adopted to accomplish, or at least make that result possible, have accomplished their goal. We're going to play another game this weekend to play test and see if maybe we've made them too strong in the Allies' favor, change things up a little bit. That remains to be seen. All right, none of the rules that we've played with, which you can see more about in the companion video, are radical. I mean, most of them were borrowed from other house rules, other forum posts. We added a couple twists of our own, but nothing major. Probably the most effective piece on the board that we've added, and we agree, is the military base, which allows you to put stuff down anywhere, and that really kind of changes the tenor of the game quite a bit, and opens up a lot of strategic possibilities as well. But so you've seen how this went. When the Axis momentum stalls, the game is going to be over eventually, because the Axis need to be strong, need to keep moving. There are some things I would have tweaked in retrospect. I mean, obviously I like the Alaska move. It was pulled on me a few games ago, and was very effective in slowing me down as the U.S. I think that was also effective here in slowing down the U.S. for a couple turns, and they would have dumped a lot more in the Atlantic, I think, had they not had to spend so much money trying to root the Japanese out of Alaska. I probably, in retrospect, wouldn't have built a military base there, or maybe all 7 of those planes, but I really wanted him to know that it was going to take him a lot of work and that he was going to need to build a lot of units. So that's a minor point. I don't think that changed anything. The real overall problem is like, you can't fight 3 or 4 different fronts as one nation and expect to expand anywhere. So Japan, came down here big and strong, obviously, but it was not able to get over that hump in Southeast Asia to take India. And I'm going to have to review and see exactly why that was. And that's the one the one inertia point that Japan really needs to get over quick when you're doing the J1 attack and get rid of Calcutta automatically. The Chinese interference, I think, slowed things down. The Anzac interference slowed things down just enough for Calcutta to be able to hold on. And then that Africa token, boom, that made a big impact in India too, because now it's drawing that money. I think also probably what kept India propped up long enough is this Middle Earth strategy. You know, when reviewing General Hand Grenade's video, I was persuaded that it was a good approach, and you know, now we've seen it work. He says that he's never seen it beat, and I guess we haven't yet either. So that's something, and that is interesting because that has the consequences all the way back up the line, right? If Japan is pouring all these resources into trying to get India and not getting over that hump, and then China continues to slowly build up just enough to stop the momentum up here. And unless Russia is just completely falling apart on the European board, you're going to start to get some Russian pushback up here at the top, which is exactly what was happening. You know, meantime, the U.S. was doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is nothing, just sitting there and projecting power by being close enough and forcing the Japanese to counteract all this navy out here. So you're fighting 1, 2, 3, 4 different fronts, 5 different fronts if you count the Anzac also, and you know, you expanded that circle out to a certain point, but you just can't get it any farther than that. So we're gonna have to tweak that a little bit, see if Japan can't push on a certain point long enough to break it, and then worry about the others. That's how the Axis win. Over here in Germany, so I was pretty happy with the way I executed the what I refer to as my Russia Crush strategy. Airdropping into eastern Poland, using that as my base of operations to expand out quickly, getting into Novgorod by Germany's turn 3, and then pushing down from there. That was the sum total of my strategy over there. And while at the same time, you know, maintaining enough of a naval presence to make a sea line possible if the opportunity arose. It did arise in this game, only by accident though. Chris can talk about that. I mean, it's good that I maintained the capacity to make that attack. But you know, we were to play this again, I wouldn't introduce those two strategies again. That wouldn't happen again. So you know, question whether even throwing everything you've got into Russia from the very beginning is ever going to be enough for Germany to get across the line when Russia has these new bonuses we've given it, has all this land to absorb, and the other allies nipping at Germany's heels. The Africa token that we've added some very important tech, as we've mentioned, and allowing that Taranto raid to happen, as we've learned in past games, nipped Italy's ability to expand, and the focus on Africa kind of sealed the deal for Italy. So when you've got all these little subs dangling off of Italy, I mean, you knew your time was limited to Germany. I knew that from turn 1. Question was there going to be enough time to pull everything into Russia, enough to make a difference? The answer was no. And it's going to be interesting to see how we can change that up. So, pass the mic to Chris, and he can add his perspective from the Allied side.
Sorry. All right. I think Brian summed up most of what occurred, I guess I'll say. My brain fart in London because I miscounted what could go in and ran the odds calculator, and when I ran it, it had like a 4 or 5% chance of success. In fact, I moved a couple guys out, and I don't know what I was doing. That's one of the, I guess, downfalls of playing for 10 hours straight is you start making strategic mistakes. But if I didn't give them London, this game probably would have been over earlier. And that's, you know, largely because I think the rules that we added are specifically designed to deter what has become sort of this more traditional, at least in the games that we play, attack mode, where Germany's crushing Russia pretty quick, and Japan's has a J1 attack and is blowing up. If you ignore the center, the middle of the map, under our house rules, you get a lot of advantageous bonuses. And playing into the Middle Earth strategy, it's sort of Middle Earth on steroids, the way the bonuses and the tokens work. So it certainly had its desired effect. I am, as we play test the house rules, concerned that we may have tilted one direction as to the other, but we won't know until we have a couple more data points. The one thing I will say, though, maybe more than anything, no, that's not true. I mean, the house rules more than anything, but the secondary thing is the tech advantage or the tech impact. So when he took London, he got super carriers. Well, that's totally garbage. Useless for Germany. He had no carriers on the board ever, nor at any time do I think he had the thought of building one.
I had a thought. I just didn't act on it.
Yeah, I mean, not great with the strategy you're going in. Japan got heavy artillery, which, okay, I mean, somewhat useful, but not really. He only has so many artillery and not a lot of capacity to build it on the mainland when he has other priorities. So those were pretty... if those were flipped and Japan had heavy carriers and Germany had super artillery or heavy artillery, then that would have been really, really bad. Whereas when I rolled the tech bonus, propaganda is what I got, which you roll 3 dice when you collect income and you get bonus IPCs to the highest, which almost every turn was a 5 or a 6. That's for the British Europe side. That's for the Indian side. On the board, he had me down to 3-4 IPCs for India, but between the couple of small bonuses I got and then the propaganda, I was able to maintain 15 to 18 each turn. Yeah, hard to keep pace with that when I'm just loading up guys and moving planes in from the Europe side. So, I don't want to overlook sort of the impact of fortuity on the result of this game, because I do think it had a role. But if I didn't give up London, I do think the game would have been over earlier. It punishes... The house rules punish that which I think we wanted to see if we could punish. Now the question is there any other strategy that would work for the Axis, or have we now broken the game the other way? We'll find out on the next game.